Hey there, UE fans! Welcome to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. Our first news item is that Jess has written another wonderful blog post in her For Indies series. So this is public speaking for indies. She's done a wonderful job of explaining, how to put together a presentation, sort of your mannerisms, how you need to prepare for it. Because anytime you're at a networking event or even in your office talking to your fellow employees, that's all public speaking, and it's a really important skill for you to have, especially when you're on a show floor or out showcasing your projects. So definitely go check that out. There's a lot of really wonderful information, and thanks to all those folks that helped contribute and answered some of her questions or gave her feedback for that. So check out the Public Speaking for Indies on the blog. Our second really major piece of news is 4.18 released on Tuesday. Huzzah! There's a lot of really great changes in there. We've had updates to the media framework. The physics asset editor has had a major overhaul, and there's volumetric light maps update. There's additional support for ARKit and AR Core in there. Definitely go check it out. There's a lot to download, and dive in and check out those new features in the release notes. As always, we have our community spotlight. Those folks that are answering questions on Answer Hub and helping out their fellow community members. We always love to give a huge shout out to those folks. So this week's helpers are Every Nun, Static Void Lol, Dar, Shadow River, Una Unagi, Cold Steel 48, Noctmare, Neelix 32, Kai Yoshida, and Roha Thrash. So thanks guys, you're our weekly karma earners for this week. Onto our community spotlight. We had the first one is an all-in-one spline generator. So this is a tool, they made it to make complex spline meshes with a few clicks. And they've done a really great job of trying to make it user-friendly. They have it's fully in blueprints. It's configurable through the details panel, and it's just supposed to be able to work with both simple and complex base materials and have just generally light or user-friendly parameters. So you can jump in, check out this tool. Just looks really handy, and it might help you folks out on your projects too. Our second community spotlight is called Blessing Alien Escape. So there's this cute little alien, and he was thrown down to Earth, and his name's Blessing, which is kind of adorable. And Earthlings are really harmful, and it's a dangerous planet. And so he disguises himself as various office or these laboratory items, and you're evading, trying to hide away from the humans and not let them spot you as you shift into random things, and avoid the guards as you're solving puzzles. And just a really neat, I love the aesthetic here and sort of the premise of the game. It looks like a lot of fun. So there's an alpha build if you want to go check it out on the forums. And our third and final community spotlight member or winner for this week is it's a modular fantasy town by William Loeffler. It's a personal project he did that he's done over the last couple months, and I just think it's a really beautiful, stylized little village, and he worked in ZBrush and Substance to put it together. They're almost exclusively modular, so you can combine them in a bajillion different ways. And he even has a breakdown of how in addition to the shots here, he has a breakdown of how he set up his materials and developed them in ZBrush and all that. So I always love to see those breakdowns. It's really helpful and lets folks know different workflows and styles that they can use to achieve their own stuff. So Great job, everybody. We love seeing all your amazing projects for this week, or always in general. All right, so thank you for joining us for our news and community spotlight. Hey, welcome to the Unreal Engine live stream. I'm your host, Amanda Bott, and with me today I have Charles, one of our lead technical animators, and then Thomas, all the way in the UK, as one of our senior programmers. So welcome to the stream, guys.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you on, and they're going to talk about the most recent updates to the physics asset editor. So you want to dive in?
Yeah, I'll start. Basically, 4.18 comes with a huge update, formerly known as PhAT. Now, the old version of PhAT was like one of the crustiest tools we had in Unreal. I think it's been around there since Unreal 3. Unreal 4 really just ported it to a new UI. Nothing has been changed since then. So it's kind of high time to get a rework. And this is what we come up with. It's pretty much holds the same kind of functionality, and all of your assets are backwards compatible. It's really just an editor that's changed. But there's a whole bunch of kind of quality of life stuff, new features, slightly works to the way that kind of interactions or things like that, that should hopefully improve workflows. From the top level, it's been reworked to use a brand new, well, not brand new, but the kind of state-of-the-art set of widgets that we use for all the other animation editors. And that's given us the ability to do much more useful previews and previews through rendering and all these kind of things. It's also got like little tiny quality of life features, like I mentioned before. Like say the old PhAT, you started the editor, and every single time you had to move the camera around because the camera was in a random direction, and then you have to kind of move. You couldn't move your character like hovering in midair. So if you didn't want to see it flop to the floor, then you were kind of didn't have an option. Now there's a whole lot of tools that allow you to move around, and the camera's in a certain place, and the rendering is all nice, things like that. It feels like you're in a much more modern tool. And Chelsea, I think, is going to kind of run through a setup of one of his characters, and we're going to hopefully see the new features.
Yeah, so...
One, real quick, could you, when you're speaking, Thomas, could you try to speak a little louder? They're having a hard time understanding you.
I will.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, so we've got this fun character from Paragon. His name's Narbash. He is got a lot of stuff going on with him, but we'll just kind of start at the beginning here. So this is just I open up. This is a mostly finished physics asset here. That takes a little longer to set the whole thing up from scratch. So I kind of wanted to start from something that's a little done here so we can really show you some of the good stuff. But some of the initial features you'll notice is like this basically looks exactly like Persona, which is our animation skeletal mesh editor. You've got the buttons up here to quickly go back and forth between the animations and the meshes and the skeleton, just like you do in Persona. And it's also got the preview scene settings here, which gives you control over everything in the scene. In old Persona, if you had a character like this who part of him was in one mesh and part of them was another mesh, you had no way to combine those things together. So now that we have this, we can very easily go in, and you'll see over here we've got we can put animations in. This is our base mesh, but down here we have additional meshes. We can go in and throw in our parts mesh, and now we can have Wardroom complete while we're working on the physics assets. We also have the ability up here, we can go and pick from some animations. So let's get him doing a little bit of marching band here. This is one of his marching animations, and we can then pause and we can scrub and do whatever we need to do to show all this off and to really look at our physics asset in ways we couldn't before. So we're going to turn this off for a second.
The meshes that you can switch out, you're not limited to editing the physics asset. mesh. So you change your preview mesh, and
Yeah.
generate new stuff for that preview mesh, and then switch back to whatever mesh you want.
Yep, and you would just change that up here. You switch this over, and when you switch it, you'll see it changes this, and it shows that you haven't applied this to the asset, so it's not a permanent change. So you switch it over, and you hit apply to asset, and then it makes that the permanent, the base mesh, the mesh that it uses when it's simulating bodies and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
we're going to leave it on this one for now, but. So now we're going to go in and I'll turn on the bodies here so you can kind of see what I've got so far. Narbash has got a lot of stuff going on him. So this is kind of just an initial setup. But I wanted to go what you'll notice down here. So really quick, showing this off. There's a whole bunch of new settings up here. Before you could just kind of set some of the default settings. Now you have the ability on the bodies to do things like you can change the opacity of these. You can have them as bright or transparent or solid as you wish. Also under constraints, you have the ability to draw constraints either as points, which I don't have them on. Let me turn them on here. So if we turn on all positions, you can draw those as points now, or you can draw them as your positions, or you can show your limits and all that type of stuff. And you can also change the constraint scale. Shoot.
Yeah, that's super useful when you like doing detail work, like fingers and like that.
Yeah, so if you're working on these, you can make them big when you're working on here, and then when you're getting close on some small detail, you can shrink them down. So we'll turn those off for now. We're going to turn on this option here, which is a very useful option. It's only selected solid. So what that's going to do is it's going to show everything transparent, so you can see your mesh a little bit better, or it's show everything clear essentially. And then whatever body you select on, it's going to make that one solid, and only those. And it works with multi-select too. So we're going to go in here and actually, we have this chain, so I want to show you how to set up this chain, because in previous PhAT, you never had the ability to set a multi-directional constraint. So you couldn't pin the chain over here and over here. You'd have to do some very complicated, weird setup that's not super intuitive. On this character previously, we had a joint here and a joint here, and then we had another joint in the middle, and I was doing linear translation motion on this, so it would bounce up and down and kind of give me sort of that swinging motion to the center, and then I had a look at constraint in the blueprint for these two joints to aim at the center joint wherever it was, which kind of worked, but it forced me to have to smooth skin the chain, which means the links didn't stay solid, and there's a whole bunch of things about that weren't necessarily ideal. But now what we can do is we can go in and create a full-on chain and have it linked on both ends, and we'll do that really quick here. So I'm going to go over here. We now have also a lot more settings over here to work in the skeleton tree. So one of the big things that has changed, there's no longer, when you go to your details panel, you'll notice there's no longer a button for constraints or bodies. There's just the constraints and bodies listed over here. So if we turn on show constraints, now we're seeing the body for these bodies and the constraints that go along with them. And when you select one or the other, it just automatically switches your view. So you don't have to worry about going back and forth and switching between a button. You just find your constraint and your body and you select them. We can also then show joints over here. So we're going to show all the bones. And we're going to turn off hide parent. We'll leave that on. It doesn't really matter. You can also show primitives, which is kind of a cool new thing, because you can actually see the primitives, the bodies, and the constraints all in one view, and you can work with them. And you'll notice this down here. This is the new graph, which is essentially a more of a graphical view of what you've got here. But if you select a body, for example, you're going to see the body here, and then you're going to see its parent object and its child objects, and then the constraints that go back and forth between them. So you can use this to window select multiple constraints or bodies and edit them however you need to that way. So there's lots of different ways to view things. For right now, what I wanted...
No context all the time. You want to select something. Like the old version, you had to kind of switch from body to constraint mode if you wanted to select constraint and things like that. It just, you couldn't... It all got in the way of what you were trying to do.
Yeah. So I'm going to go, let's turn off primitives, let's turn off constraints, and let's turn off bodies so we just get the skeleton here. I want to go in on this chain, it should be at the top. And we've already got a body there.
Oh, you might need to switch a mesh because you've currently got the chain additional, I think.
No, it's good.
Is it? Okay.
So if you look at the bodies here, this is 8. So we're going to go from 7 down. We're going to select these guys. And we're going to leave that one off. And we're going to add a new body. So everything is context sensitive now. So if you're in here or you're in here, you right click on something, everything you're going to get is showing up. Everything you need is going to show up here based on what you have selected in your right click menu. So we're going to add replace bodies, and that's going to give us bodies for all of our entire hierarchy.
And the settings for how those are automatically generated are in the Tools tab. And that allows you to pick basically the same
yes. Good point.
Before. Like you can generate spheres, complex meshes, those things like that. It's just now it's front and center in the tool. So if you want to iterate on this thing really quick and change the kind of things that you're generating, then you can do it right there and then, rather than it being hidden in some tiny menu that pops up a little dialogue that you then have to click through 3 other pop-ups and stuff like that to get this.
Yeah, so you do all that right here in this Tools tab, which can be found through the Windows menu as well, right there. So that created our body. So I'm going to go in and set all of these. So now I have all those bodies selected. Let's go to the Details panel. We're going to give them just a little bit of linear dampening. We're going to set a decent amount of angular dampening because we don't want them to have too much energy when they're bouncing around, or they'll start to tear apart. And then there's this other new setting down here which we wanted to point it out, which was added in. It's basically it's a scaler for inertial tension. So if you've got a body that's this big, but you want that to be the collision for it, but you want it to behave like a body that's this big, you can't do that with old PhAT. You couldn't get it to work like that. So you can actually, with this now, you can scale it on all axes or on certain axes, and it will actually make it move like a bigger body. So it's really what it's doing is it's scaling the inertial movement down on that given axis. So you can kind of make things slow down. You don't want to set it too high. If you set it too high, anywhere. I found that anywhere from like 1.1 to 1.3 is usually good, depending on what you want to do. Sometimes if you have a hierarchy that you're going to have something swinging from, you might want to set the first body to a much higher amount and then taper it off as you go down to the lower body, so you get kind of that nice whipping swing at the end of it, which can create some pretty nice motion. So we're going to just set this to 1.2 for right now, just to kind of slow those down a little bit. And then we're going to go in and find our constraints. So we'll turn off constraints, turn on bodies, and let's turn off bones as well because we don't need those anymore. They're just getting in the way. All right, so now here we have our chains. So this is the one that I already had set up. We need to turn on our constraint view display now.
Limits.
And now, so now here, you can see on this one we had it set up a certain way. So I'm going to get the rest of these. Right now they're all default settings. So we're going to get the rest of these to look more down along lines of that. So I'm going to select all of those, and we're going to set them over here on our limits. We're going to give them all a little bit of limited motion. We're just going to give them a super small amount. The reason we do this is because when this chain is linked at the end here to the body, it's going to naturally, as these pull, it's going to want to put pressure on that chain, and it's going to want to pull at it, which is going to give you sort of a little bouncy and add energy to the system. So if we put a little tiny bit of motion on it, that allows it to pull apart at each link, just a tiny amount, which is enough to kind of dampen that down, but not force it to break apart. So it won't separate enough to see the actual links come apart. And then we're going to give it some angular limits, and we'll set them to 40, 40, and 10, just so we have a tiny little bit of twist and mostly just straight linear motion. And we'll leave everything else the same for these for now. So now if we go in here and, oh, one more thing, almost forgot. So we got to set these guys to not, or to be actually simulated. So you'll see here there's the physics type. You wanna manage that and everything. I don't ever leave anything at default. You typically, I mean, default is gonna basically set it to whatever the default is set for your project. So you kind of, I like to control it better. So I'll make sure everything. Sorry, Thomas, go ahead.
So you can control it on a per character basis.
Yeah.
So if they default, it'll inherit the settings from the mesh component. The mesh component has a same setting, type setting. So you can do a full ragdoll that way. Whereas here right now we just set kind of jiggy bits on a character. But if you're doing a full ragdoll, then you probably want to control that at a higher level.
Yeah. So you would, from a character blueprint or from a game blueprint, you would set the whole thing to be simulated on the fly so that the character can be running and animating and then go into simulating. So at this point, if we press play, you'll see we get that chain moving, and it's moving pretty well. We got some movement on the drum up there already. So, but it's not linking; it's not staying put there. So let's set that up next. So now we want to go in and I want to take this last joint. And you can right-click on this, and there's a whole bunch of options in here now. But we can go in, you can add shapes, regenerate bodies will recreate them based off of whatever the defaults are. Or if you're doing convex hulls, you can regenerate them based on that if the geometry changes or whatnot. So then, you know, collision.
Also worth noting that all the tools that were kind of hidden, keyboard shortcuts and things like that before, are now all been exposed in this menu. So things like mirror, a fair amount of people didn't know that tool existed. Now it doesn't work very well right now, but people didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
Could you repeat what tools were exposed?
Well, things like mirror tool's been there for a long time, but it's never been in previous versions of PhAT. There was no menu button, there was no button for it anywhere. It was just kind of a hidden tool.
It was a hidden.
You had to know to press the M key in order to do a mirror, and because it was never exposed anywhere, people generally didn't know that it was even there. And like Thomas said, it needs some work right now. It kind of mirrors, but it doesn't quite do it right. So we're working on fixing that in a future version.
Yeah, I think so anyway, the reason why we never got any bug reports was because nobody knew it existed.
Yeah. So we're going to add a new constraint to this guy. So this is a custom constraint. So I'm going to constrain it. I want it to be following the pelvis of the character. So I'm going to constrain it to the pelvis. That's going to drop in a new constraint right here. So pelvis to the main drum. So that's going to drop in the constraint, but it's going to put it at the pelvis. So we need to move it over into place now. So I'm going to move it. Now, when you move things and rotate things, you can move it. You can do it in two ways. You can either move it just with the cursor by itself, or you can hold the Alt key down while you do it. If you hold the Alt key down, which I'm doing now, you'll see that it separates it. So that's going to basically leave the center of the constraint here, but it's going to put the actual, it's going to leave the reference point of the constraint back here. If you want to get that back, you can right-click and hit snap. That'll snap it all the way back to where it is. So I'm going to just move it without that, so that because I want the whole thing to be at in an all-new position. So we'll get this guy kind of lined up over here quick. And I'm not going to do it perfect because we're just trying to get it roughed in. That's the wrong spot, so over there. All right, so that's kind of where our new constraint's going to be. And then we need to go set up some settings on it. So again, we're gonna leave this locked, but we're going to.
It's worth noting that the whole kind of adding constraints to the physics asset was all possible before. It's just the tool didn't let you do it. And it's the reason why we built the tool to have these new workflows exposed.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's put some limits on this guy. You can see it came in similar to the moving. It came in at a weird rotation, so we want the X to be pointing down the length. So I'm going to switch over, and we're going to hold Alt this time to move the whole reference frame. And I'm going to angle it down and kind of point it roughly down the change. It doesn't have to be precise because it's going to stay within this cone anyways, but come on. We'll put it about like that. And I'm going to angle it down a little bit because I want to make sure that there's plenty of room going down this direction when it goes, because that center of that chain, when it when it simulates, the center of this chain is going to pull down, which is going to pull the whole thing down. And if it hits the limit, if it hits this limit here, when it starts calculating the soft constraints, it's not going to do a very good job of not jittering. So it's going to start to jitter as it hits that end, and it's pulling on it, trying to, these bodies are going to be saying, hey, you should go past it, but it won't allow it to. So that's going to create some extra energy we don't want. So we're going to do that, and we'll put this, again, just to help with that, we're going to put that at about 50. We'll make this about 20. We'll just make it a little narrower, 30 maybe. And we'll give it a little tiny bit of twist. So that should give us what we need there. And now, just really quickly, we should be able to simulate and see it locking into place. So it looks like we've got some issues there. I think the issue we currently have with it bouncing up like that is actually collision, because when you create a body by default, it's always got collision with everything else in the scene. So we're going to turn off our constraints so I can see bodies here. We're going to select that guy and this body down here, and we'll get those three. And let's turn off collision for those so that now you can see, if we turn off the selected only, you'll notice that it shows anything that's blue when you have a body selected, it's going to have collision with. So this has collision with that. It has collision with these, which you would want to turn all collision off on all these to do your final asset so that you don't end up with things colliding in ways that you don't want to. But right now we've turned those off, so those three don't have collision, or those two don't have collision with that anymore, which should be fine. This one we kind of want to collide with it, because when the leg moves up and down, we want it to push it a little bit. And similarly over here, this one's got collision with the drum. So let's disable collision there, and can't select it for some reason. Drum, and that one. And we'll disable collision there too, just because otherwise that's going to be pushing it out. So now if we go and simulate, we're going to get a nice dangling chain. And this is where the fun begins, because now you can get in here and you can start pushing it around, and you can poke it and see how it's going to behave. And that's all the stuff that you could do in normal PhAT. You know, you could hold control and right click and grab bodies and drag them around the environment and see how things are going to behave, and that was all fine and dandy. But now that we're in PhAT, we have the ability to do some things like this. We can go and show all bones. We'll hide these bodies and constraints just to simplify things. Now we can go in here and we can grab our thigh bone. Oh, and again, because it's all in persona now, we can start to filter, which makes it much easier to find things. So we can grab this guy, and now we can start doing this. We can simulate and push it around and animate the leg and see how it's going to behave, and you can really get an idea what your physics asset's going to look like and how it's going to react to the world before you ever put it in game, before you would have to test this much more rigidly, like while running around in game, to really see all this. And it's just much harder to do that way.
Yeah, similarly for like a full ragdoll, you can like put it in the air and drop it from a height, like that. Just like
yep. And then you can also go in and do things like this. We can take and turn on our animation while we're simulating. We're going to reset that.
Yeah, weirdly, the old PhAT didn't let you put animation on it until you start simulating. As right now, you can change it at any time.
Yep. We can just, while it's simulating, I can go in here and I can grab and put on a different animation and have him rocking out now and doing all kinds of fun stuff.
That's awesome.
Now the other thing, which we're not going to show here because we didn't make a full ragdoll physics asset, but you can actually go in and you can have an animation playing. Let's go back to that marching one. You can have an animation playing like this, and then hit simulate while it's playing, and it'll immediately start simulating. So you can have a running animation, and you can kind of time it and just eyeball it for testing. And right when it gets to the point where you want them to take a bullet hit, you can press the simulate button, and they'll immediately go into ragdoll, and they'll just kind of maintain their motion, and they go forward, and they just start ragdolling and fall. And so you can see the whole simulation, how it's playing out. It's really, really so much better.
For like situations where you kind of get weird kind of ping effects where a body will be interpenetrating in some animation, and you're never quite sure where, but you've got like a nice little sandbox here to test all of those combinations.
Yep. And you can put them in. Another example would be you could play their idle animation on them and have them standing there idling, turn on simulate, and like hold control and use the poke to poke the bodies and see how the body might behave when it takes a hit, or there's all kinds of ways to use it. So the next one I wanted to show, we're going to show a couple different types of simulations here, just to give you some ideas on ways you can use this. So Wardrum here, Narbash, Wardrum was his code name, so that's what I always call him because that's how I know him. Narbash has he has a lot of fat around his midsection here. He's kind of a big guy. So we wanted to make sure that had some jiggly motion to it. So I added a body here just to kind of give him some motion so you can kind of see his fat jiggle, which is always fun. You poke his jiggly fat. But if we want to add one of those, I'll show you kind of what we want to do there. So let's find the belly joints here. So we got a bunch of belly joints. So we're going to add a little more to his belly on the side over here. So I'm going to add a new body.
That's sad, Billy.
And now that came in small like that because, again, his torso is not the default mesh. If I were to change it to the default mesh over here, it would have used your skinning information to create the body the correct size to encompass that. So this one is going to be a lot of linear motion. It's not going to be as much angular limits or angular rotation. So I'm going to make the body kind of at an angle here, kind of to fill up the space that we wanted to jiggle around. And I want to go in and set its settings here first. I'll just get that done. Oh, hey, I need to turn on constraints. All right. So I'm going to give him just a little bit of linear dampening, a little bit of angular dampening. And then again with this, I'm going to give this a little less because I want it to have plenty of jiggle motion to it. So we've got our settings here, and again we need to set the physics type to simulated. Then we're going to go and get the constraint. Constraint isn't showing up.
Oh, this.
Oh, that's because the constraint doesn't have a name. That's why.
What does it come in as?
What's that?
What do they normally come in as? You said it doesn't.
Well, it comes in. Its name isn't belly. It shows the name of the object it's linking and the object it's linking to.
Gotcha.
So it's more of a link connection. It just displays that information. So it probably isn't finding it as a string. I imagine that could probably be fixed, right, Thomas?
Yeah, probably.
All right. So
it might already be fixed, because we're carrying on working on this thing. 418 branched from main quite a while ago. Carrying on fixing various bugs and issues with it as we went around.
All right, so right now our body is centered right on our constraint. So I want to actually move the body a little bit off just to kind of give it a little tiny bit of rotation so it doesn't pivot perfectly around the center, which will go to a very circular rotation as opposed to more of an orbital rotation. So just because it'll give the fat a little more motion. So I'm going to move that out to the side a little bit, and then let's set some linear limits here. I'm going to set this to a pretty big number, 15. And we'll show our limits up here so that we can see that. So now when you go in here, you can see that it's got linear, if we move it off a little bit more. Sorry, that's the body constraint. Move it over. You can see it's got linear limits of 15 and all that in all angles and all axes right there. So that's basically what that means. It's going to move within that range. And rotationally, we really don't have to set any limits on it. I usually do just to be safe, but you really don't need to set much for them. So I'm just going to turn those on for right now. Then the next thing we're going to do, we're going to leave the soft constraints, so we're never really going to hit them anyways on this. So if we simulate this as it is right now, that PhAT's just going to kind of fall. It doesn't really maintain. It doesn't act like it has any connection to the actual body. It just kind of floats around. So we want to have it kind of stay right in the center there. So I'm going to go and select that constraint. And we're going to put some motors on it. So I'm going to turn on its linear motor. Give it a value of about 300 or so. And the number on this, you don't really, it kind of depends on the size of your body, how much it's going to be, and things like, if the body is perfectly centered on the constraint, it's not going to, the body is not going to apply much friction or much tension to the constraint. So it's not going to need as much for like angular motors or anything to hold it into place. But if you took the body and moved it way up here, so it had this big distance, that's going to really want to pull. And then you're going to need even more, especially like on the angular. So you kind of got to just play with it and see what your settings are. There's no really set number on these, but I found on this one that
solver itself doesn't take like any specific units or anything like that. The strings that it models use software constraints like that. The parameters are parameters of that simulation rather than some kind of actual proper physical thing.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that for them?
Yeah, so essentially, not sure I understood exactly how you said that, Thomas. Can you repeat that a little louder? I don't think they can hear you very well.
My microphone sucks. It's all right. Carry on.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, we added some springs to that now. So now when you activate it, it's going to kind of try to hold itself in place, and it's going to rotate. It's got a little too much rotational angular motion there, so we'll set this up a little higher. And then, yeah, so now we're starting to get a little better idea. It's still probably moving, translating a little far. Another trick that you will see is if you go in here, under these, you have the option to show the body drawing while in edit mode and the body drawing while in simulation mode. So if you take and turn this on to solid in simulation mode, now when we simulate it, the body doesn't go away. So you get a better idea of what's happening to it, because when it hides it, it's sometimes hard to see what's going on. So you can see there, it's kind of dropping out. So my linear motor strength probably isn't high enough, so let's crank that up to 500. Looks like we might need to... Yeah, oh, I know what's pushing it out. Haha. I always forget about that. So it's got collision, this body. Turn off simulation. This body has collision with that body, which is why it's pushing it out. So now if we simulate, there we go. So now you can see it kind of, no matter where I pull it, it's going to try and go back to that area, and it's going to have more of a jiggly sort of fat feel to it. And a lot of this is skinning too. You can go in and you kind of want to skin your bone, place your bone a little bit inside the body, kind of in the center of your fat mass, and then smooth skin it out very radially, and you want to smooth skin it out in a large area so that it, affects a decent sized area around it. And if you put multiple bones in like that, you can do pretty nice jiggling with overlap by having those kind of blending in with each other quite a bit. So that's kind of the setup for a fat type of body or muscle type body. And then one other one that we'll do here, excuse me, is the shoulder. So we're going to go in here. So I've got the shoulder pad bone up here for this giant skull, which is a pretty cool feature of Narbash. So we're going to add a body in for this guy. And again, it didn't make it the correct size because of the preview mesh, but that's okay, because it's a really quick thing to scale this guy up. So we'll just do something like that. Now I'm going to have this one, I want it to be pushed by the arm here. So I want the arm, when the arm raises up, to push the shoulder pad up and have it kind of bounce off of that arm. So I'm going to go in and place it just generally just above it so that it's not clipping, because we don't want it to push it when it starts the simulation, but we want to kind of just lightly drop down on it. And again, set it to simulated. And we'll put a decent amount of damping on this one. And a little bit of this again. Again, this inertial tension scale just kind of takes the edge off, really. So now let's go to the constraint, and we'll set this to, we're going to leave it locked on linear, and then an angular, we're going to set it about, we're going to give it about 3 on the x-axis, and then we're going to do 15 on the y, and 2 on the z, sorry, 15 on the z and 2 on the y, which is going to give it kind of allow it to move. We want it to move up and down a lot, but we want it to have a little bit of side-to-side motion and a tiny bit of roll, so it kind of rolls around the arm a little bit. So that's all those numbers are for, just to give it a little bit of those motions. And then we'll go and, again, we got to rotate. You can see that the constraint is facing the wrong direction. Now, that's one thing that's kind of key to setting up physics assets. When you build your joints in Maya or in your DCC app or Max or whatever it is you're using, you want to build as much as you can with the X down the length of the bone, kind of the direction that the bone's going to move from, and use your Z as your up axis, and then let Y be your roll, because that's what it uses by default when it creates the bodies. So while you don't have to do that, you don't have to be limited to that, because you can always go in here and just rotate them like this, just hold down Alt and rotate this guy down 90 degrees, and now it's set up basically that way. It just adds extra work to do it that way. There's also a shortcut, which if you hold Q, if you hit Q, it actually just toggles it between those axes. It toggles at 90 degrees on each axis one at a time. So you can kind of use that as a quick shortcut there too. But if you build all your bodies that way to begin with, it's one less thing you need to do. Say that again, Thomas?
There's another example of something that was hidden before
yes.
in a keyboard shortcut, because you're obviously, you've got a Stockholm syndrome, say, you know about all these things.
Yeah.
Nobody else does.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's why we're doing this Twitch stream, to show everybody else.
Yeah. Now you're revealing all these secrets to our community for us.
All right. So the other thing we want to do here, and just, you could actually get away with this piece not actually colliding with the arm. If you want to, you can go in and set. So again, with the rotation, if I rotate this up like that, not holding the Alt key, now it's going to rotate only within these limits. So it's already going to start off when you start simulating at that limit. So if you simulate it, it's just going to start right there. It's not going to drop anything. Even if I pull off, collision with these, let's disable collision with that. You'll see that even though now there's no collision there, it won't drop down there. It's at its limit. So you can kind of do it that way. But then when you do that, then when the arm goes up, it's not going to push it. So we're going to put collision back on just with the arm there. And then now when we simulate, it's not much to see right there, but it's going to bounce up and down and do its thing. But now when you go in and start messing with things, with joints, we can go grab that upper arm again. Now we can start to push it and bounce it around and see how it's going to bounce off the arm when we actually are simulating. Let's reset that. Oh, and you can, anytime you move a joint, this is kind of a key thing that is important. So if you're placing joints and posing joints and moving things around in here and you want it to get back, it's going to retain that position even if you play an animation on it. If I rotate his arm way forward and play an animation, it's going to use that motion that I've placed here as an additive motion to what the animation is playing. So you want to make sure that you go and you can do a select all joints, or you can just do it to the individual one and just do reset selected bone transforms. That's just going to reset it to its default just in the viewer. It doesn't actually change anything in the mesh. It doesn't change anything in the animation. It doesn't edit anything there, and it doesn't save with the physics asset. When you close the editor and reopen it, it'll be back to where it was by default. It's just kind of while you're in preview editing mode, something that you can mess with to test things. So you can always put them right back.
Again, that's something that came from all the other animation editors. They all have that feature.
Yeah.
It's especially useful here, in fact.
Yep. So now if we go and simulate this guy and play an animation, let's turn off our bodies. So we can see it. You can see that that shoulder pad is now bouncing up around and being pushed by the arm and giving us some nice extra motion up there. So.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's kind of the majority of what we wanted to show as far as the creation side of things. I'll show you over here. So this is kind of the full final cleaned up. I basically cleaned up everything on him here for the most part. So we can kind of play around with this. And you'll notice a few things here just to give you some more ideas. Went in and to this necklace thing here, we added a body up here at the top and a joint on the cowbell. And then I added some collisions in here to do sort of his chest shape. And same with up here, we got these big clavicle bodies and some bodies up here on the shoulders on the spine 3. So that the hair can collide with that. I've got these bodies back here, which are the triceps. Sorry, let me turn this off so I stop selecting them. Which are triceps, so they're more of the fat jiggle stuff that you get down here. And so there's a lot of different things you can do. Another one we did, we've got dynamics on the cymbal, so it'll bounce around. And then you'll notice this odd-shaped body around the drum. So there's really no way to do a big cylindrical shape like this using the bodies that are by default. We have spheres, we have pills, and we have boxes, essentially, or we have convex hulls. This is a convex hull, and there's a few different ways you can set that up. You can make where's my content browser? You can make a static mesh. So I've got this static mesh of the drum, and you can go in and use we're trying to show simple collision. You can use the collision here to use the auto convex, or you can use any of these to actually create a collision sphere around that. And then when you get in here, you can right click on, if you right click on the drum, you can actually, where is it? Copy from collision from static mesh. So then you can go in there and copy the collision from the static mesh by selecting it. That'll put the collision on there, or you can use the under, where's it, add shape? Oh no, sorry. Sorry, that was over here. Where's my tools tab go? There it is. So under here you can switch it to single convex hull, or you can put it on multi-convex hull. And multi-convex hull is going to give you a decent shape. Single convex hull is going to give you a decent shape, and it's going to be a little faster to do. Multi is going to give you a much more accurate shape, but it's going to be a lot slower to make. We're not going to do it here because it takes a few minutes for it to run, and we don't want to sit and watch a progress bar. But you switch it over to that, and then you go over to here, you right-click on the body, and you do regenerate bodies, and it'll regenerate it based off of the settings in the tools. So you can make, that's how we made this shape earlier. So now we have this shape that does much better collision, collides with this over here better, and gives us a flat surface on the top to collide with. And the reason I did that is because I also wanted to set up this. So I went and put, for him, I went and actually put a body on the front of each of the drum handles, and one on his pointer finger here, because we got some fun animations our animators made for him a while ago. Particularly, we have this one here. So we've got a drum solo where he's actually drumming and pounding on the drums, and you'll see the bodies kind of interact with each other, but there's not really much movement. Like the cymbal doesn't move, and the drum doesn't do a lot of movement other than the movement it's getting from the body. But if we do that same thing now, let's turn these off so we can see it better. If we turn these, we simulate it now, you'll notice that now the drum is getting pushed by those drums, and he's actually hitting the cymbal and actually drumming on the drum, which is pretty cool. And we also have this one, which is fun, his recall animation. He gets all depressed and puts his drumsticks away. He's got to give a thumbs up, and then he uses that finger body I put on there to tap the drum, the cymbal. So you can do a lot of fun things with this once you start to really understand how it works and how these bodies are going to interact with each other. That would normally have to be hand keyed by an animator, but in this we can just let it do its thing.
That's really cool.
So yeah, and you'll see that that chain is holding up pretty well and collides when you do some of these other animations. It collides pretty nicely with his leg and gets pushed off, and it all works pretty good.
Nice. That's
So yeah, I think that's
love his dance.
about it. I
That's
think.
pretty much
You got
it.
anything else you want to say,
Uh,
Thomas?
yeah, well, there's one or two extra things. There's you mentioned the graph. I find it really useful to navigate that.
You're gonna have
But there's a
Thomas.
Yeah,
new
you're gonna have
You're gonna have to
to
like shove that thing in
slow
your
down
throat
a
because we
little and
can't hear you.
enunciate.
hello. There's a new profiles tab, which
Oh, yes.
is the equivalent of old. No, if you go down and look at the actual tab,
That's right here.
this allows you to manage physical animation and constraint profiles, which I don't think that many people used, although we did use it a lot on Robo Recall. Previously, all you had to manage this was like a drop-down list, and just like deleting them was really cumbersome. You had to go into another tab and then delete something that had the same name, and then make sure that everything was synchronized, and you couldn't undo that. All these things were really, really clunky. So now we've just made it more simplified. So if you want to create a new profile, you click new, and if you want to delete it, you delete. Select the one that you've got active and assign and unassigned bodies and constraints. But that's a bit more straightforward to manage. But it's not entirely exciting. So we'll probably and I think really the only thing that's left is that we're continually improving the tool. So with people like Charles using it and a lot of our other teams, we're getting a lot of feedback because it's new, and we're going to continually improve it over the next few versions. So watch out for new things. We're intending on fixing mirroring problems. We know there's issues with cut and paste and things like that, but we're on it.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah, we've got I've already sent Thomas a list quite a long list of things that we want to fix. So he's got plenty of stuff to keep him busy over there.
It's not as long as the list you sent me at first. The first time.
Yeah.
Well, I know some of our folks have some questions, so if you don't mind, we'll start going through some of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of touched on this a little bit before, but they're wondering how performant was it? Like, he has a lot of capsules and collisions on him. Is that really taxing, or is it actually pretty?
It's so with the new there's the new rigid body solver that we use in blueprints that you plug it through. What's it called again, Thomas? In the anime. What's
the rigid body node in an animation blueprint?
Yeah.
That runs what's called an immediate mode solver.
Immediate mode,
which
yes.
kind of simulates these things in a little pocket world, so they don't need to kind of use the entire physics. They're a hell of a lot more efficient, and they're able to run like asynchronously, so they don't impact performance of other things. So while you've got a lot of physics objects in here, you probably won't see much impact on frame rate, at least on the game thread, which is kind of the one you actually care about. That's your kind of shortest path. You'll have to obviously profile these things if they're particularly expensive, especially if you're using things like convex holes collision here, because they obviously have a lot more overhead than just spheres or capsules. But if you're using the rigid body stuff, then by all means go to town, because we really haven't pushed the system as far as we can yet.
Yeah, and you'd notice with him, I mean, there's a lot of places on Narbash where I could have used boxes or I could have used different shapes, but I try to stick to pills as much as possible. One thing that we do have that we're using on a internal project right now, but it hasn't gone into a release build yet, is tapered capsules, which will be super big. Is the ability to basically you'll be able to put like on an arm, you can put a big capsule here and a little capsule in the middle and a big capsule here, or especially on like the calves of your legs, and you'll be able to, it'll collide just in between that. It's similar to the cloth spheres that Apex has, if you're familiar with Apex.
I should mention that the tapered capsules are currently only used for cloth collision.
Yes.
So rigid body collision.
Yes, that's true. Good point. But we'll be putting those in at some point. And yeah, I mean, Narbash here, everything that you see simulated on him right now is currently simulated in the shipped version of him in Paragon. It was simulated all using Anim Dynamics. And by all accounts, from what we can tell, rigid bodies are no more expensive potentially cheaper in some cases than aerodynamics. So I don't. I mean, this guy's right now got 85 bodies, and I think to finish him off, I'd probably be around the 108 range. And it probably, if I take out the aerodynamics on him and put this in its place, it would probably be just as performant. So, and that's in a shipped version of Paragon. So I think performance-wise, as long as you're using the rigid body, the new rigid body node to play your physics assets, it's pretty good.
Okay. And then, do you know if these are done more on the CPU or the GPU side? They were wondering.
That would be for you, Tom.
Entirely CPU.
All CPU?
Yeah, entirely CPU. We don't support the GPU simulation.
Okay. Let's see. They're wondering, can you keybind like toggle filters for showing the bones? You were going into the menu to like hide the capsules and things. Like, can you keybind some of that, or setting up in the skeleton?
Yeah, we've been talking about some different ways to optimize that, because it is a little bit cumbersome to constantly be going into here. I've been talking to Thomas about maybe pulling especially these 3 display groups off onto a little tab that could be docked over here, or possibly having
UX.
Yeah, having all of this.
We were kind of considering something similar to the content browser, where you've got like simple filters that you can just toggle on and off really easily.
Yeah, and we might have like these buttons might be just docked under here under the search filter type of thing, so that they're much more easy to go. And then, yeah, ideally I'd like to keybind several things. Like one thing I want to keybind is like if you have a body selected and you want to go to its constraint, you can just hit a single button. It'll pop right to the constraint for that body, and then hit that button again. It'll pop right back to the body. So you could really quickly go back and forth. So there's a whole bunch of improvements. That's more stuff on that big list of stuff.
So
that
quality
we're
of life
trying
improvements that'll come later.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first major release, and we got it to a point where we were happy with it, and it was like a parity with the old version, with a whole lot of extra nice features on top, and it didn't suck like the old version. And then we got a whole bunch of other stuff to put on top of that next version.
Yeah, it's definitely above parity in my mind, because it's way better than the old version. Way better.
You guys have done so much to it. They were actually wondering, when you imported him, did you import all of the parts, like the drum, the chain, the shoulder pad, and all that, together or separately to bring them in?
You talking about the mesh or the?
Yeah.
He's two meshes. We're actually in Paragon we're doing in the content browser here. You'll see for the way we're doing the part system for like skins and things like that, we're splitting certain things off. So he's got 2 meshes. So he's got the PhAT stream, or the parts mesh, and his base mesh. They were just imported as 2 separate meshes, but they share the same skeleton. They share all the same animation and everything. So they're just 2 separate meshes, and then because they share all the same skeleton and stuff, they can both be brought in on top of each other.
Okay.
Not sure if that answered exactly what they were wondering, but
probably, I believe so. And then, can you assign different collision profiles or object types to individual bodies?
Different. Well, that's what. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, bodies could be assigned to different collision profiles.
Okay.
Kind of the way around it goes, but yes, you can.
Cool.
That's kind of the point of that management tab.
Gotcha. And then, let's see. Well, we've got to wrap it up, so I'm going to call over our Q&A there. Again, thank you both so much for joining us. There's clearly been tons of features that have been added or reworked here, and you're improving that pipeline and trying to make it all better for everybody. So we're happy to have you on. Real quick before we go, don't forget to keep submitting your projects for the NVIDIA Edge program. Our Epic Mega Jam is actually coming up next week, so that'll launch, or the theme announce is next Thursday, and we're actually going to do a quick prep stream on Tuesday at 2 p.m. We have Assembla on. They're going to talk about how to set up Perforce and SVN and work with that, and then also we have a couple winners that'll be our guest from previous jams that are going to talk about sort of best practices for game jams and what how you can succeed and what makes that process easier for you. And I'm going to drop a link for a survey, so if you have feedback for us, how we did, what topics you'd like to see in the future, please fill that out. But again, thank you both so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
Bye.
Bye.